Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Would help for my. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We're going to have a really fascinating show for you. We're going to talk about peptides in a way that it's never been talked about before. Everybody repeats science. We all talk, oh, this does that. But there are very few people who are on the bleeding edge of peptide technology. My next guest is like the Cyrano de Bergerac of peptides. He doesn't get any credit at all, but everybody uses his stuff and makes it sound like it's their own. And we're going to share some information that you've probably never heard before. We're going to be talking to Justin Kirkland today, and he is a biochemist of amazing quality. He invents stuff, he patents stuff, and then other companies go out and sell it, and you think they were the geniuses behind it when in fact it was Justin Kirkland. And what we're going to talk about in the way of peptides today is not anything that any other peptide person is going to talk about, because these are iterations of things that start in Justin's brain and then he makes them into realities. Nothing like it. So before we get started with that, I have to, of course, thank a company that makes this show possible, and that's Legendary Foods. And Legendary Foods just introduced their new sweet roll. They come in cinnamon, chocolate, and wild berry. If you've been in the airport and thought to yourself, you know what, I'm just going to cut loose, I'm going to have a Cinnabon. I know I'm going to feel crappy for like 6 days after that, but I just need that taste, that sugar, that softness. You can do it now without guilt. Legendary Foods' new sweet rolls are exactly like a cinnamon Cinnabon, a chocolate Cinnabon, or a wild berry Cinnabon. But get this, 20 grams of high-quality dairy protein, 1 gram of sugar, 5 net carbs. So you can stay in your lane, feel good after eating them, but enjoy the decadence of eating something as tasty as a cinnamon bun. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10, not just for the 10% off, but to let them know that their advertising dollars are paying off when they advertise on Superhuman Radio. Check them out. And don't forget, while you're there, check out the Legendary Tasty Pastry, which was a modified version of a Pop-Tart. Once again, 20 grams of high quality protein, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 4 to 5 net carbs, depending on the flavor. Again, shrnetwork.biz/legendary, code SHR10. Use that code. Get yourself not only cinnamon sweet rolls, but also the tasty pastry. And buy enough for your kids, too, because once they taste them, they're going to want to take them to school with them. And now, without further delay, get my guest on here. Open up his microphone. How you doing, Justin?
Hey, I'm doing real good. Thanks for having me today, Carl.
How'd you like that Cyrano de Bergerac of the peptide?
It was quite the introduction for sure.
Yeah, I actually read that book when I was in 7th grade, and it's always stuck with me because he did all these wonderful things, but he didn't get the credit for it, and didn't get the love from the woman he was writing the poetry for on behalf of.
Right.
That's it. So let's start with your pedigree. Give me a picture of your journey. Where did you start when you started to get into biological sciences?
I mean, it's been my whole life. I mean, I've been wanting to be a scientist for as long as I can remember. I mean, I got the little chemistry kit when I was in grade school, and climbing trees and looking at birds, eggs, and nests, and trying to study science. Forever.
The only thing I was able to successfully do with that chemistry set was make that sulfur-smelling fart.
Right.
And my mother hated me for it because we lived in a 3-room apartment and you couldn't go anywhere to get away from that smell when I made it. So
That's awesome.
we all started there, I guess, huh? So
Yeah, for sure.
You went to medical school in Belize, right?
I did, yeah. I took that was just a few years ago. Working in medicine and with peptides for a long time, I decided, hey, I kind of understand how these things work. Maybe I could become a doctor and treat patients with them. And I did a few semesters of medical school in Belize and decided that I would actually reach more patients and be able to treat more patients, help more people by developing drugs and drug delivery systems versus actually just being a doctor working one-on-one with a patient. So it was a great experience. I've got a lot of great stories. I actually got to participate in an autopsy of a American retiree that died when I was down there. They used the medical school to perform the autopsy. And so that was a wild experience.
I bet. So without naming names, it's safe to say that many of the larger compounding pharmacies you've done work for in order to develop some of their products and peptides, right?
Yeah. So I've worked for a couple of compounding pharmacies in the US and was hired to develop products, either manufacture them or develop them, educate doctors. I've spoken at a lot of different conferences, part of the A4M staff on some of the peptide education. And so I'd split my time. They've always been really interesting jobs because I get my lab time. So I get to do the hands-on lab work. I get to help with education. I get to interact with doctors and understand how they're, get their perspective on how they're treating their patients. So yeah, it was the best of all the worlds.
Yeah. And it's safe to say that you hold some amazing patents. Some may be pending, maybe others are patents. But you're just not about peptides. I mean, you have a wide variety of interests. Talk about some of the peptides that people would be thrilled to hear about. I mean, patents that you work on.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the patents, the first patent I was awarded was a formulation patent about micronizing droplets. And so that was used in the CBD space originally. And you look at, CBD and the cannabinoids being lipophilic, they're not very orally active. And we came up with some ways that one of the companies I was consulting for to make them disperse better, make them be more bioavailable. And so, yeah, from there, I went on to the patent, I guess that's been the most successful is one on how to make brominated LSD without making LSD. And, in the last few years, there's definitely been a lot of psychedelic companies come onto the market. And that industry hasn't been around for a long time in that kind of pharmaceutical capacity. And so when we originally looked at brominated LSD for treating cluster headaches, it was just way too much overhead to actually handle a Schedule I drug. So I came up with a process to avoid handling the controlled substance and got a patent that was actually able then to transfer to a pharmaceutical company that's developing the drug.
So what's the advantage of a brominated LSD without making LSD? I don't.
Yeah, so there's a couple points. So the brominated LSD is not psychedelic; it's not a psychoactive compound, and it appears certainly in some studies at universities and now going into clinical trials that it'll treat things like cluster headaches, potentially major depressive disorder. So it looks like it's a really active medicinal compound, but handling getting the license and facility to manufacture a kilogram of LSD requires, millions of dollars of just security just to be able to do that. And I have worked in some of those facilities where, there's 30 cameras that know you're coming down the road before you even get to the building and the gate. And so right. The overhead of controlled substance handling is just, it's super difficult. And so by creating a process that avoided that, I just kind of streamlined, the ability to make a really neat drug without all that regulatory oversight.
And aren't you also working on a patent to use with MDMA?
Yeah. So in my role as Chief Science Officer at Optimi Health up in Canada, we've been manufacturing MDMA, and I came up with a kind of an innovative process that's really scalable and highly efficient and really safe to manufacture MDMA, and we're doing that as we speak. And that drug will be entering clinical trials. it looks like, as far as some of the psychedelics go, that MDMA is probably going to be the first drug to be approved as early as next year. And Health Canada is approved for therapists. It's really interesting to me. So the therapists that will be administering MDMA have the opportunity to have it administered to them as part of their training, so they understand the pharmacology of the drug.
They should.
And so we're manufacturing some of that drug that'll be used in those therapist training. And the estimates are that they're going to need tens of thousands of therapists to be trained as the drug becomes available.
The one time I wish I would have been a doctor.
Right.
So, it's logical. When I went to school to be an optometrist, we had to fit each other with contact lenses, so we understood what the patient would go through, trying to touch their own eyeball. Luckily, I was already wearing contact lenses, so I thrived in that class. But so MDMA would be used to treat major depressive disorder. That's what they're doing in the University of London now. I believe.
Yeah, I see. PTSD is probably the most effective indication right now that's been studied.
Excellent. All right, so what I wanted to do was establish your pedigree and who you are, because we have had lots of doctors come on and talk about a peptide who have spent graciously hours and hours researching and reading papers, and that's wonderful. But when you have a guy who's on the bleeding edge of developing drug delivery systems, you have different perspectives that we won't get from clinical trials and stuff like that. I'm sure that you can kind of see the future a little bit when you work with some of these things. And we want to talk about BPC today because it is by far the most popular peptide available, and especially since it was made orally. Now, explain the type of BPC that comes in your product, and we're going to promote it here in a minute, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a supplement company, Nutraneeds, and one of our products we call BPC. It is the peptide, the 15 amino acid peptide, BPC 157. So it's a really, not an uncommon peptide. It's in quite a few products on the market, and as you know, and I know for sure, I mean the capabilities of it and application of it are super far ranging. We're going
to cover that. I want to talk first. I want to talk about the unique delivery system that you use to actually get it delivered, because everybody thinks because BPC originates endogenously in the gut, that just taking BPC is going to successfully do what you want it to do, but that's not necessarily true, right?
Well, I think it is to a certain extent. If you look at all the research kind of goes back to some of the checks in the early 90s studying this material. And so BPC as body protection compound is a much larger, heavier molecular weight protein. And they identified some of the metabolites of that protein as BPC 157. And so my goal is probably in the next month or so is to sort of have some videos on my website kind of showing that metabolic process and why it is that BPC 157 is a DSHEA compliant dietary supplement ingredient. As far as I guess science behind its availability, because it's found in the gut already as it is, it's pretty stable when delivered orally. So it is an orally active peptide. It's one of not a ton of them. We do see that as some of the peptides are smaller, there's less breakdown because they're already sort of at that metabolic breakdown point. And so the product I have is BPC 157 as the arginate salt. And so it's orally active and highly stable just in and of itself as just a basic amino acid.
And so if it's orally active, as you say, does the arginate salt produce an advantage for delivery?
The arginate salt's primary for stability. You see that in some of the studies, it's more stable at the pH of the stomach acid as that salt versus the acetate salt. So you're having I guess increased time present for activity.
Would it be an advantage to raise alkalinity in the stomach while taking BPC?
I don't think it's necessary in the case of BPC specifically.
Okay. So what is the molecular weight of BPC?
Oh, okay.
I'm
That's
sorry.
not a number I keep on top of my head, but I'm sure it's pretty easy to find.
Well, is it in the megadalton? Is it in Dalton?
No, it's I can pull it up here real
It's got to
quick.
be smaller than growth hormone, right? It's only 15.
Oh yeah, no, it's only 15 amino acids, 62 carbons. So of course it's not going to tell me what it is right off the top. Yeah, it's not of a molecular weight that we're really concerned about as far as passing through 1,419 Daltons.
Yeah,
so
that's
1,500.
not. Yeah, I mean that's almost deliverable through the skin. Not that you'd want to, unless you had a skin-specific reason for BPC. I think 500 is pretty much the upper end of ability to get through the stratum corneum. Then you can use obviously electrophoresis or some advanced compounds to enhance delivery. But that's a fairly small peptide.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the delivery systems that you work on.
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time trying to study drug delivery and drug delivery mechanisms. The problem, and generally speaking, and it comes up with BPC. People will say, or customers will say, well, I bet that doesn't work. It's a peptide, and peptides aren't orally active. And certainly doctors are often taught that is the case. Because generally speaking, a peptide being a component of a protein, you have enzymes in your body like pepsin that their purpose is to break down proteins. I mean, you and I love a good hunk of meat, and your body's designed to metabolize that down into building blocks to build yourself back up. The first thing that occurs when foods, you have enzymes in your saliva that start to break down food. When they go into your stomach, you have additional enzymes, including pepsin. And then you also have a super low pH. It's very acidic. We have stomach acid that we have to deal with. And then the other issue with delivering drugs orally is that they have to pass through something to get into the bloodstream at some point in your body. And so if you look at the prescribing info for Ribelsis, the oral semaglutide, they want you to take it on an empty stomach so that hopefully it'll touch the epithelial layer of the stomach so that it can pass through into the bloodstream. So with oral bioavailability, a lot of drugs, you're potentially going against a beverage or food or something that's not allowing the drug to come in contact with a mucous membrane so that it can get into the bloodstream.
Does the shape of the peptide play a role in its ability to be delivered through the gut? And explain the shapes, like folded, circular, and the challenge.
It does to some extent for sure. There's what's pretty wild about peptides is that as a chain of amino acids, you have a different compound. I mean, your listeners who are obviously interested in nutrition and whatnot have had branched chain amino acids. They've had supplements like arginine or lysine or other amino acids. And so each one of those compounds has its own chemical property. And so when you string those all together in a new molecule, I used to make tesamorelin in the lab. It's 43 amino acids, and each one of those amino acids has its own chemical reactivity. Well, now I've got literally a bandolier, if you will, of amino acids that have all that different chemical activities on the same molecule. And so whether it's electronegativity or polarity or whatever aspects of it that have to do with its bioavailability and transport, it's pretty wild to understand all those different factors. And so kind of as you asked, what I've found is that cyclic peptides actually permeate much easier than long linear peptides. The shorter peptides, the lower molecular weight, seem to actually have better permeability. But we've seen in my research molecules as large as insulin, which I think is like, was it like 60,000 Daltons? It's way up there, 60 or 6. I've seen that go through skin and intestines with permeation enhancers. So you're still getting that permeability even with large molecules. And you see a lot more molecules these days that are biologics that are actually really actual full proteins.
The way I've described peptides on this show over the years is peptides are actually messages. And every amino acid is a word, and every connection is a bond. The bond is so there's a syntax. The fact that glycine follows, serine in this particular one, and then the comma or the dash or the no space being the molecular, the strength of the bond. So these are actually like messages. Are peptides simply just messages that tell cells to do things?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great characterization. It's a great way to explain it. And if you look at one of the examples I've given in some of my doctor's education is if you look at melanotan and bremelanotide, there's literally one change from a hydroxyl to an amine. Like literally the entire peptide has one change, and in 95 to 99% of the patients, that stops the tanning mechanism but maintains the prosexual mechanism. So literally in this massive peptide, it's one molecular change that, as you said, changes that signal to the body on how it's going to react.
Does the microbiome play a role in the ability for orally delivered peptides to do what they need to do?
Yeah, I would. I haven't specifically looked at really any science in that area, but I will tell you that the enzymes that are present to break down some of those may be generated by microbes, the bioflora in the gut, and so it wouldn't surprise me if that is the case. And also, I would suggest too that probably the peptides that are present probably can also modify or improve the biome in the gut as well.
Talk about the compound SNAC, SNAC.
Yeah, so one of the things that you and I first started talking about when we had the idea for this show was, semaglutide's a super popular drug right now. So popular that it's on the FDA shortage list at this date, meaning that it's not available fully to the amount of prescriptions that are out there. And where semaglutide really blew up was when it went from being a diabetes drug into a weight loss drug. Right. So Wegovy, approved last year, works really well. A lot of people are seeing really incredible results on it. And yeah, it became so popular. It was hard to get. And so Wegovy is the injectable drug. And the dose on Wegovy is 2.4 milligrams once a week. So it's got a really long half-life. It's a really large molecule. It's got I think a huge fatty acid hanging off of it. It's kind of a neat shaped molecule. But getting up to that dose takes about 5 months because of the side effects associated with it as a GLP-1 agonist. The actual starting dose is 250 micrograms. And so patients start at 250 micrograms once a week for 4 weeks in a row, and then they double that for the next 4 weeks and double it for the next 4 weeks until you reach the 2.4 milligram injectable dose. And so there's this dose escalation as your body kind of learns to adapt to some of the side effects of the peptide. Now, where SNAC comes into play, and SNAC is an acronym for sodium salcaprosate. SNAC is a transcellular permeation enhancer. And so what it's doing is actually helping push the molecule through the cells, transcellular, to get into the bloodstream or transport to the active site. And so the drug Ribelsis is actually semaglutide, the exact same peptide, but in an oral formulation. And so it's combined with SNAC, and then taken orally. And so when the pill lands in the stomach, they tell you to take it on an empty stomach. Hopefully it's going to be near the epithelial layer, and the SNAC's going to help the peptide get through the cells and into the bloodstream. Now, what I think is kind of amazing with SNAC is that it's because of a variety of reasons, not SNAC itself. It's a really inefficient process. And so the dosing on Ribelsis is 3, 7, and 14 milligrams orally daily. You have an escalation starting with the lowest dose. And so if you think about 14 milligrams every single day, the dosing in comparison to the injections extremely high. And that's because the best estimates are that about 1% of the drug actually gets delivered appropriately. And so you've got the enzymes we've been talking about trying to break down the peptide in the stomach, and a whole bunch of other factors, both
what about
chemically and biologically.
Liver play a role in trying to get SNAC?
It can't. Not with snack. You have first pass metabolism that's going to break down a lot of drugs. But with snack, you're trying to avoid some of that by getting it into the bloodstream within the stomach itself. And you'll still have some go to the liver for sure.
So in transdermal delivery, using liposomes to encapsulate compounds and kind of be like a Trojan horse to disrupt the stratum cornea so that the skin opens up like the tiles on your floor, and then these encapsulated compounds get in, and then since they're lipophilic, they're fats, they get attracted to the fatty layer in the skin, and then they release. But the nice thing about that approach is it's specific to the drug that was compounded into it. Does snack have the ability to carry other things across the gut lining that weren't necessarily compounded into them? Is it like random? Like, okay, I'm bringing this peptide in, but hey, look at this pathogen. I'll take it with me.
Yeah, that's some of the discussions on the safety and efficacy of some of these permeation enhancers. Is that for a lot of times, especially with things that are opening the tight junctions, things that are in the intestine, opening something up to let the drug pass through, is that
that is exactly what autoimmune disorders are, like things that get through the junctions and into the bloodstream that you don't want.
Right. And so, yeah, I think there are questions as far as, what other things are getting through, whether they're pathogens or other drugs that may not be the target, for sure.
Intranasal seems to be a popular delivery system. I make intranasal melanotan. I've made intranasal PE 22, 24, 24, for depression for friends that it actually worked. I mean, they used it for the prescribed number of days. I forget if it was half a milligram or 2 milligrams a day for 28 days, I think it was. And really, they got off of their SSRIs. That like it did something that was kind of semi-permanent, at least I can guess. What about intranasal delivery? Are there any advantages, disadvantages to using intranasal delivery to deliver peptides?
Yeah, so there's a variety of benefits there for sure. And so some of the stuff that I've personally worked on are, again, intranasal peptide delivery with permeation enhancers. And so I'm adding in, again, one of these enhancers. And in the case of the product I developed, I used an alkyl maltoside is what they're called. Okay. And so it's kind of a surfactant. And again, like when you're talking about your liposomes, when you're sort of encapsulating a product and changing the solubility of it and permeability of it, you get an improved delivery. And so we've seen a lot of intranasal drugs, especially out of Russia with C-Lank and C-Max. Mm-hmm. That seems to be a pretty common delivery system. I was reading some patent literature one weekend and read an article on a chemical called DDM, dodecyl maltoside, one of these alkyl maltosides. And it's actually in an FDA-approved drug called Valtoco, which is intranasal Valium. And so it's approved for patients with seizures. And so when a person falls down, is on the ground, they're having a seizure and they're moving, you really can't administer an oral drug because their jaw could be seized. You can't really administer an injectable drug because they're physically moving and you don't want the needle to break off. But the ability to deliver intranasal spray, it isn't as difficult as the other two mechanisms of delivery. And so intranasal Valium is actually an FDA-approved drug for seizure patients. What the belief is that the combination of the drug with the permeation enhancer actually gets it through the sinuses and into some of the nerves and actually goes right up the nerves into the brain. So you're actually getting a rapid delivery to the brain itself. And with that rapid delivery, you get the seizures seem to cease within like 60 seconds. So it's a really amazing product. And so after reading that, I thought, wow, that seems super straightforward and kind of super easy. That DDM compounds used in protein chemistry a lot of times to prevent proteins from agglomerating. So as a surfactant, it kind of breaks them up and you can kind of dilute them and use them in your research. And so I wanted to kind of understand the efficiency of delivery. And from my experience with the pharmacies, I knew that the growth hormone secretagogues were some of the more popular drugs. And one of the barriers to those becoming even more popular was the fact that they're delivered by injection. And generally speaking, the public just doesn't want to stick a needle in themselves. So I thought, well, hey,
Pussies.
yeah, exactly. So, if we could come up with, oral's certainly the biggest preference, but intranasal is not so bad. And so I just started working on formulations for intranasal peptides using DDM. And I originally was going to try some of the secretagogues, and I realized that, the amount of time it takes to get a response, and then the measurement of that response, I'd have to go get some blood drawn and measure my own IGF-1. I tried to figure out what the faster, more efficient way to understand drug delivery would have been. And so I thought, hey, I've got some PT141 as a raw material. It's kind of a rapid response. I'm going to know the same day if the drug's been delivered or not. And so that's the drug I selected, primarily, honestly, to understand the drug delivery mechanism more so than the actual, administration of the PT141 itself, the bremelanotide.
Right. And so you knew right away it was working if you had an erection.
I did.
Oxytocin would do that because it would trigger vasopressin and you'd feel the head rush. So I'm of the thought that intranasal peptides should be used almost exclusively for drugs you want to get to the brain almost exclusively and fast. Like using, I use intranasal melanotan, not so much for tanning, but for the benefits of controlling inflammation. And I actually get a nootropic effect from melanotan. I do get tan over the course of weeks, but it's getting to my brain first. Would you agree that drugs that you are trying to get to your brain for brain health or recovery are more appropriately used intranasally, and other drugs, if you're just looking for systemic effects, you should be injecting them or maybe having an oral product?
No, I do think that is the case. I mean, especially with this Valium, the reason it was so rapidly acting was it was getting delivered at a high efficiency into the brain in a rapid fashion. And so earlier on in our conversation, we talked about some of these permeation enhancers and how there's transcellular and paracellular delivery. The body's pretty awesome in that we've got the blood-brain barrier, the BBB that we talk about in drug pharmacology. And so it's hard a lot of times to get drugs delivered to the brain. That mechanism's transcytosis, and it's there for a reason. The brain wants to keep itself safe and partitioned away from the rest of the body. And so we do have the ability to manipulate that on a certain level to get drugs there. So yeah, I do think intranasal is a great way to get things delivered to the brain.
Yeah. I want to put this banner up right now. So nutraneeds is a new sponsor of Superhuman Radio, and they have a lot more than just BPC. They have the original chill pill, the DHHB. They also have a hair regrowth product that uses penetration enhancer, so you don't have to micro needle the scalp, which is really cool. They have face creams. I'm just tripping up here, but they also have NMN, which is really, really, really cool. And it's a combination. It has some resveratrol in it. It has a couple different compounds in it that all work synergistically. If you go to shrnetwork.biz/nutraneeds, NUTRANEEDS, and use the code SHR, you'll save 10% on everything and anything that you order there. So please go check them out. Show them some love because they are a sponsor now. And plus, they have the best products in these categories available. As you can hear talking to Justin, he is deep into this space. He is a thought leader, bleeding edge. He's making these things, and he's rarefying them and making them work better. And you can probably find some of these products on the different labels that are made by him and resold as raw materials, or you could just buy them from the guy and reward him for being the brains behind a lot of the progress in these categories, really. So please show him some love. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with lots more discussions. I have more questions. We'll talk about thymosin beta 4 also, because I have become very fascinated, and I literally read 6 or 7 studies a night before bed on thymosin beta 4, and I want to talk about what you're going to be doing with TB 500 or TB 4 in the future. Okay.
Sounds great.
All right, sit tight. We'll be right back. Millions of people know that shrewd food is the smartest way to snack. Ever get that craving for crunchy snacks, but don't want to eat all those empty carbs? Well, instead of puffed corn or wheat, like most snacks, Shrewd Food puffs protein powder. This gives these crazy efficient macros: 2 grams of carbs, 14 grams of protein. That's as high as 67% protein, and with only 90 calories. So knock out the carbs, but keep the amazing flavor and crunch you're looking for. Shrewd Food is now available at Walmart and Sprouts. Or go to shrnetwork.biz/shrewdfood and use the code SHR25 for 25% off your order. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
Great sleep upgrades you on virtually every level: body fat, muscle mass, mood, brain function, and countless other ways. But taking melatonin alone isn't the answer. Thanks to a brand new sleep formula developed by my friends at Bioptimizers, you can experience the best night's sleep ever. Sleep Breakthrough is a delicious sleep drink that supports your natural melatonin production and relaxation without creating a dependency, so you can have the best night's sleep on demand. It targets 5 different sleep pathways to give you the best sleep ever. And best of all, you'll wake up feeling rested and rejuvenated so that you can have the best day possible. For an exclusive offer for my listeners, go to sleepbreakthrough.com/SHR and use the code SHR10 for 10% off. Plus, you can unlock special gifts with the value of at least $20. This is a limited time offer, so go to sleepbreakthrough.com/SHR right now.
Hey guys, it's time to change your f***ing underwear, and it's time to change to Sheath. Sheath's underwear's revolutionary designs allows your man parts to hang the way they would naturally hang if you were not wearing underwear. And this improves the blood flow throughout the day to the twigs and berries. If you've never experienced wearing a pair of Sheath underwear, boy, is there an exciting experience waiting for you. Grab a pen and write this down. Go to shrnetwork.biz/sheath. That's SHEATH. And use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 20% off your first pair. And get this, if you're not completely satisfied, send them back for a full refund. That's shrnetwork.biz/sheath.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. We're talking with Justin Kirkland, biochemist extraordinaire, and we're talking about the science behind some peptides and their deliveries. I want to talk more about BPC before we talk about thymosin beta 4. So everybody thinks that BPC is just for recovery, and some people think it's for gut health too because it is produced naturally. To expand on the effects of recovery, gut health, but what else does BPC seem to have an effect on?
Yeah, one of one of good friends of mine, her son, for him, it's the greatest thing in the world. That's his own words, due to his Crohn's disease. So he had some GI issues that kind of precluded him from even leaving the home. So that affected him obviously socially, going to school, participating in activities he enjoys. And he had tried all kinds of different interventions, and BPC is the one that works for him. And so it's been amazing. So we've definitely seen it in GI for Crohn's disease, IBS, just general gut health associated with acid reflux. So orally, I've definitely, and I do see, and I'm sure you do too, on social media or out there, especially with doctors, that there's always the suggestion to take it orally for gut issues and injectable for repair issues. I think there could be some benefits in those, but I also think that the benefit of taking it either way certainly is far better than not taking it at all, because I think ultimately, while you do get some local activity, the drug's eventually going to go systemic and get to where it needs to be anyways.
So should you take it on an empty stomach? And is there any way to help it get down into the lower parts of the GI where the Crohn's disease and the IBS actually occur?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think because of the size and the its resistance to enzymatic degradation, I've got him as an example, and many of the other patients I know in similar situations. They're taking the regular basic encapsulated BPC, whether it's from a pharmacy or a supplement company, and they're getting the relief they need. So the product's certainly getting delivered well enough to treat the indications.
Any ability to gauge how long they take it before they start to notice beneficial effects?
Yeah, I would say it definitely takes a few days to get some benefit. We do have some patients that'll run a cycle of it, and they'll seem to take care of alleviating the problem. And then I've also seen other patients that, especially with some severe GI issues, taking it daily, and they maintain it, 365 days of the year.
Body protection complex, compound, the name implies it does stuff for the entire body. Is there any other stuff that people don't know that BPC seems to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen it attenuate different receptors in the brain. We've seen stuff as far as mood improvements. We've seen stuff as far as some drugs not having efficacy return to being efficacious after a round of BPC. One of the stereotypical patients I hear about when I talk with some of the doctors are, the dad whose son's in football. He was in football back in high school, and next thing you know, he's throwing the ball in the backyard, and maybe his shoulder's got a little tear and doesn't quite want to deal with surgery. And so we do see some benefits in the repair that it's certainly well known for.
Muscle or soft tissue specific?
I would say probably soft tissue more so than muscle, at least in the experience of the doctors I speak with.
Is there a BPC receptor on cells?
No, I'm not. So one of the things we talk about a lot in drug pharmacology is that key and lock mechanism. And so a lot of times with small molecules, you'll see that drug as the key hits a protein or a receptor, and it fits into that receptor a certain way. And so some of the projects I've been involved in the past were developed through X-ray crystallography. So Dr. Katzenellenbogen and Dr. K at the University of Illinois, where I used to live, did some protein crystallography on the androgen receptor. So now looking at the androgen receptor, we know what molecules fit in there. Well, we all know testosterone and any of the steroids fit in that receptor. And his goal through some of his research was to make selectivity to that androgen receptor. So he wanted that key to fit in there just the way he wants. And so what we see with basic androgens are a lack of selectivity. So you see a lot of growth signals all over the place. And so out of his research is kind of where SARMs became developed. So selective androgen receptor modulators. And so that was the goal. And I actually, when I worked for a CRO, Obiter Research in Champaign, Illinois, we developed a couple thousand SARMs for a company called Radius Pharmaceuticals, of which RAD 140, some of your listeners have probably seen, actually entered clinical trials. In their case, their market was for elderly. So they wanted to see every grandma and grandpa that's, becoming frail have some androgen agonists to help build up the muscle mass and bone mass so that you don't see someone fall and break their hip and spend the rest of their life in the nursing home. And so little off topic, but going back to what you said, with the peptides, we're generally seeing signaling mechanisms more so than that key and receptor relationship.
But interestingly enough, I remember reading a study, it had to be like 12 or 15 years ago, that showed that growth hormone docks in the estrogen receptor in women. And because it's not estrogen, it is a SARM effect. The funny thing about what people don't understand about receptors is the receptor is a mosaic of areas. You know, like if you looked at a city, it's cut up into counties. Sure. And like testosterone activates the entire androgen receptor because it fits specifically and activates all those little domains. But when people take stuff like pine bark, you know, because it's supposed to have androgenic effects, it's probably not acting like testosterone. It's probably activating some domains of that receptor, but not others. And we really don't know if that's good or bad. We really don't. We don't know if there's an entourage effect in the hormone that was designed to dock in that receptor that is lacking when we start using these things that are selectively activating receptors. That's my opinion. I don't have any scientific degree. Tell me I'm wrong or right. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the protein's got a lot of surface area, and testosterone's a really small molecule. So it's probably docking in there, obviously getting a physiological response in a very small portion of the overall receptor. I mean, if you look at RAD140 as an exact example, it's a pretty good sized molecule. MK677 as a growth hormone secretagogue, it's a pretty big molecule. Yeah. And even some of these, biological drugs. And so as, science improves and our knowledge increases and some of these studies are done, it definitely approves, some of the drugs and drug delivery.
So Travis Lovelace says, I got sick the other day and started taking BPC 157. I'm taking 1 gram a day since yesterday, and I'm already starting to feel better. Placebo?
No, it depends. Obviously, what's causing his illness. Certainly, when we look at a lot of the different peptides that you and I have talked about over the years, you've got inflammation. You've got inflammation as a response to something. If BPC is answering some of that inflammation, some of his symptoms might be going away. You look at some of the thymosin compounds, thymosin alpha-1, thymosin beta-4. You see some of the reduction in cytokines as a result for an infection or inflammation. And so, yeah, it's not a surprise. I don't know if he means 1 milligram a day, probably.
I mean, 1 gram a day is 1,000 milligrams. How many milligrams are in a capsule?
I got 2 capsules of my product is 1 milligram. So
yeah,
I doubt he's taken a couple thousand capsules of.
Yeah,
unless he's got some access to stuff and he's doing something we don't know.
Maybe we should get to know Travis Lovelace. Maybe he could hook us up with a couple kilos of it. I'd like that. So Bobby Boucher, who you remember him from the Waterboy movie, right?
Oh, right.
Obviously, that's his screen name. He's been around my show for a long time, and I appreciate him when he shows up. Do PEDs and excess hormones speed up telomere shortening? You have any information on that?
I don't. When I go to the conferences and whatnot, I see the TA65 guys a lot, and their entire.
I can't believe they're still in business. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, their products, it's pricey. Yeah, it's crazy.
And I thought they were going to go out of business when a study came out. They were already around for like 4 or 5 years that said that what is the primary compound that they derive their telomerase activator from? It's a plant base. It's not ashwagandha. It's not rhodiola. I can't think of the name of it, but it starts with there's a G in there because
cycloastragenol.
Astragalus
is the compound. Yeah, astragalus.
So when they isolated that one compound from astragalus, a study came out about 4 or 5 years ago that showed that whole astragalus works even better because of the entourage effect of the original plant. And like I thought, surely no one's going to pay that kind of money for an extract when they're not getting the whole thing, but people still buy it. And let me say something before you answer this. The single best thing that will lengthen telomeres I'm going to give you classifications because you could guess all day at this. They tested 26 foods and 13 beverages to see if any of them had effect on telomere length. Guess what the one thing that actually improved the length of telomeres is?
I have no idea.
It's beef. I have
Really?
the study, the original paper.
Ah,
A guy from Sweden, I think, Patrick Dahlin, came on, presented the paper. It was great. It's the only food that lengthens telomeres. If you think telomeres mean something, and that is debatable at this point in time, if you think telomeres mean something, you better be eating beef.
right.
That pisses a lot of people off.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is, well, not answer his question, at least discuss it, is that certainly in as long as both of us have been in sort of regenerative medicine and anti-aging medicine, is there is that, well, you have your lifespan and your health span, obviously. And I do believe, we know that a lot of the remedies or treatments are accelerating growth. And in some sense, the acceleration of growth is not, it's the opposite of anti-aging. You know, I as much as I like reading the studies where, fasting and near starvation allows rodents to live longer, I like a nice dinner. So I do think with, HRT and growth hormone products and other products, as you are accelerating repair, maintaining muscle mass and quality of life, that, there certainly probably is something to be said about the fact that you're accelerating some aspects of aging, depending on how you want to define or measure aging.
Dr. Irina and Michael Conboy came on the show early in the year. I don't know if you know who they are. They have the Conboy Lab up in San Francisco at the University of San Francisco, I believe it is. And they are deep into this whole plasmapheresis and plasma dilution.
Mm-hmm.
They're having real success with it. There are some clinics now in the United States. I got a guy coming back on. He's had like 3 or 4 treatments now. We're going to see what his markers were on his blood work. But plasmapheresis is fascinating because all of the mutant proteins stay in your plasma and just keep traveling around, and they bioaccumulate. And this leads to my theory of the aging. When we look at phenotypical aging, slowing down of the body, excessive pain, nervous system starts to break down, demyelination, they can all be attributed to some sort of metabolic debris accumulation. This is my theory, right? Aubrey de Grey had the theory of mitochondria. My theory is we accumulate, because look, the body doesn't know what a year is. It doesn't even know what a second is. But what it does know is when debris accumulates to a point where cells start to malfunction, this is what we see in aging. And she came on the show and she actually validated my opinion. So what they do is they remove plasma and then they put back in saline and all the proteins that which 99% of them made in the liver. Now think about how disgusting people's livers are, by the way, today. So, and they see the markers of aging. After 3 sessions of plasmapheresis, people's markers in their 60s went down to in their 20s. And,
oh, wow.
This is real science. We're going to hear more about this. And I'm going to start just donating plasma in a couple months. I'm doing some other things first before I do that. I want to make my liver healthy to make sure that the proteins that it makes on its own, I'm creating a good plasma dilution model. But with that saying, she said something on the show that was profound. And it's actually something that my friend Ron Penna says all the time. Ron always says, the magic in the diet isn't what you start eating, it's what you stop eating, okay? And she said on the show, and I quoted her, I passed it around as a meme, whatever you call it. And she said, you can't take anything to extend life. It's what you remove from the body that will extend life.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
That feeds into my theory of bioaccumulation of metabolic debris. So even if you take peptides, they're not going to work unless you get the insult that's causing the problem in the first place out of your body, whether it's diet or whatever. But this is fascinating because people are taking 60,000 pills a day thinking they're going to live longer. All they're doing is putting a greater strain on their liver, and their liver makes those defunct proteins that circulate in your plasma. So
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. There was that drug. I worked at a chemical plant in Mexico quite a few years ago. I was in 2005, and ALT 711 was kind of big in the news. It's it's actually a simple chemical to make. And so I made a little bit on request of some friends. And that's in some sense following exactly what you're saying from sort of a different direction, in the sense that their thought was a lot of cardiovascular disease was from our diet and the cross links that occur from different types of sugar buildups. And so your hardening of your arteries and some of your glands are associated, again, like what you said, with some of these buildups that are problems. And so probably eliminating the intake of some of those things would fix that. But this drug was going in and breaking some of that back up to add the malleability back. Certainly, and there is one company I've been following that's doing that in California, a small startup that's gone to the next generation of drugs to repair membranes in our body, to reverse some of the I guess, add the elasticity back. At least anecdotally, one patient I know that was taking an ALT 711, as an older guy, he was having to get up and use the bathroom every night. And he noticed, he goes, "Oh, I didn't really notice anything." But he goes, "Oh yeah, I did notice." He goes, "I don't have to get up 3 times a night to urinate." And, the assumption was maybe his bladder was getting a little bit of elasticity back to it.
So we're talking about, when we talk about this, we're talking about fibrosis of tissue, organs. I want to talk about that on the other side of the break, because this is where thymosin beta-4 seems to have a magic effect. Sean Wasson wants to know if you have plans on making injectable peptides. You made injectable peptides for pharmacies, but you can't sell those unless you're a pharmacy, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to determine, I'm always looking at what's next. I did have a great time working at the pharmacies. Right now, I've looked at setting up a wholesale drug distribution business, trying to provide some different compounds to pharmacies and maybe instructing them on some of these drug formulations. I feel like I've got a little bit of an edge, obviously, in my education, in the sense that some of the pharmacists I talk to say, "Hey, I ordered these drugs." And when I say, "Hey, how do I use it?" The suppliers go, "I don't have a clue.
We just sell it."
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, having some ability, number one, to help with the formulations. And then number two, I've got an analytical lab at my facility that I just, not enough hours in the day to use. I want to get a lot more proficient, or get someone hired to help me with that, to do quality control and testing and stability tests. I hear, I see and hear stuff all the time of, I dropped my peptide thing, or it sat in the car, or it sat out overnight. Is it ruined? And the fact of the matter is my answer is always, there's a way to measure that. And, we need to do that test.
So what I found? Peptides aren't as fragile as that we think they are, because they literally put them in an ultrasonic bath in order to make sure that it's evenly dispersed in the liquid before they lyophilize it. And if that doesn't break up the chains, I don't think anything will. But also, I've left melanotan out for 2 weeks, and I thought, let me just see. And I injected it, and son of a gun, if I didn't feel a flush and turn red. So I suspect that, and critical thinking tells us these peptides exist in 98-degree bodies.
Right.
Let's look a little critically at how fragile they are. It's like they also, when we talk about buffering them, putting them all in one syringe, unless there's some magic in the blood and plasma, they live in your body all together. And there seems to be a great fidelity where they don't bond. The only thing I say is, when I put IGF-1, when I put MGF, IGF-1 EC, into the same syringe with multiple peptides, it gets heavy and falls, and you can see it looks like a cloud. But when I put it in with real growth hormone, it doesn't do that. So they seem to play nicely together. But that's just something I've been. Yeah, they're not as fragile as people think they are. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll answer any other questions that are out there, and we're going to talk a little bit about thymosin beta-4, because I think it deserves a mention in this show. Real quick, if you want to learn more about these wonderful products and even buy them, which is the idea, to use shrnetwork.biz/nutraneeds, NUTRANEEDS, and use the code SHR to save 10% off. This is the company. If you're going to buy oral peptides or products, you really need to look here first, because he's making this stuff himself. He's creating these products to begin with. He's patenting them. Other people are just, it's like the echo chamber. Go right to the source. Go right to the source. Go to Justin's website. I will be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Stay tuned. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that connects customers with partnered providers from the comfort of your home. Merrick provides concierge service with your very own patient care provider as your health advocate. You'll go over all your needs and goals, from improving sexual function, hair loss prevention, increased muscle, fat loss, and overall improved performance. Prescribed treatment options can be ordered and shipped directly to you if you meet the requirements, all from the comfort of your home. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Merrick Health. That's MAREKHEALTH and order your comprehensives and get 10% off with code SHR. Don't forget to add the lab analysis to have results reviewed with potential over-the-counter supplements or treatment recommendations. That's shrnetwork.biz/Merrick Health and use code SHR at checkout. Or order your own desired labs with code SHR and get 10% off your first lab order. Hey, this is Carl Lenore. I am the inventor of Gun Leash. Over 500,000 handguns are lost in the United States every year. If you carry a gun like I do, you are 300 times more likely to lose your gun. And 15% of those guns will end up in criminals' hands and used in the commission of a crime. Gun Leash solves that problem. Gun Leash is a patented, no-tracking proximity device the size of a postage stamp. It will alert you as soon as your gun is outside of your range, so you can never leave your gun behind. To learn more and to be notified when Gun Leash is available at the end of January, go to gunleash.com and get on our mailing list. Gun Leash. Never lose your gun, never leave your gun. Hey, this is Carl Lenore, host of the longest-running health, fitness, and anti-aging podcast in the world, Superhuman Radio. For 17 years, I've heard promises of devices and gadgets that could eliminate chronic pain. I live with chronic pain. For 2 decades, I was a power lifter, and my lumbar spine shows all the signs of abuse. And so I live with sciatic nerve pain. It varies from just annoying to debilitating. The other thing is I love to ride my motorcycle. I ride it every day if I can. And obviously my motorcycle doesn't treat my lumbar spine good. I got the Kylo patch and I promised to give it a try, but I got to be honest with you, I thought it was bullshit. But I did what I was instructed. Find the right spot over the pain. You'll feel the pain start to go away. Leave it there and go about your business. And I did that. And that day I got on my motorcycle and I rode for about 3 hours. It was a Saturday. Well, I came home that day, got off my bike and had no back pain. That's rare. In fact, it's impossible. And I spent the rest of the day wearing the Kylo patch and I did not experience any sciatic nerve pain, which is ridiculous because after riding for 3 hours in a row, I always get pain in my back. So I gave it a try the next day. I got up in the morning. I had some sciatic nerve pain. I put it over the area where the pain was emanating from, right above my right glute muscle. And in seconds, the pain was gone. I thought, this can't be. How can this be? And I think that's what most people think when they see Kylo. They think, how could that be? Well, the technology is legit. And I can tell you right now, if you give Kylo a try, you'll find that you don't have to live with chronic pain. Check it out.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
It would have helped if I had the, so go to shrnetwork.biz/get Kylo. I believe that's it. Hold on a second. Let me look. Go Kylo. shrnetwork.biz/go Kylo. And Kylo is spelled Kailo. Use the code SHR30 and get 30% off. It's really a cool device. And I if it doesn't work, email me and tell me. But if it does work, email me and tell me. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about today is thymosin beta 4. I have done a deep dive on thymosin beta 4, and it's fascinating. Aside from inflammation, I think the ability for it to sequester actin and literally reduce and reverse fibrotic tissue in organs, in the heart. I've found studies where fibrotic tissue literally disappeared in the liver, in the heart. We know that it affects ischemic events, because ischemic events develop fibrotic tissue in the brain and the heart. It reverses those. Talk about this magic, because when we talk about fibrosis, we're talking about aging. We're coming back to the discussion about bioaccumulation, collagen not being appropriately placed in the skin, clustered together. And look, ED, erectile dysfunction, they sell that expensive thing. I think it's like $800 or $900. It's like a rocket shape. It's a slow wave device that you use on your penis. And over the course of like 40 sessions, it breaks up the fibrosis in your penis, in the spongy part of your penis. I mean, I would think just take thymosin beta-4, and I found the protocol. Go ahead. I'm going to ask you about the protocol in a second.
Yeah, thymosin beta-4 is definitely one of my favorite peptides. I mean, my own personal experience is probably the healthiest I've ever been is when I was on a very good, solid regimen of a clean diet, really great weightlifting and workout program, and regular thymosin beta-4 use. My recovery, and I think that's where it shined, at least for that specific purpose, my recovery from workouts and weightlifting were incredible. I mean, I didn't have delayed onset muscle soreness, none of the DOMs. And so I would actually question, like, wow, am I working out hard enough? Because, I would reach for something kind of expecting that little ache in the shoulder or something, or back from such a heavy lifting day. And I wouldn't feel it the next day. Heavy squats, I'm walking up the stairs. I used to be sore, we've all been there. And for me, thymosin beta-4 made that disappear 100%. It was much more readily available in the past. I know, at least from the compounding pharmacies, the laws changed where the FDA defined the difference between a protein and a peptide as 40 amino acids, and thymosin beta-4 is 43.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is, and it's certainly something we should look at further, is that anti-fibrotic portion is actually a portion. It's a certain, I think it's the first 4 or 5 amino acids of the thymosin beta-4 are the parts that are anti-fibrotic. And so I'd love to look at some of the bioavailability as to whether, that portion's orally active or can be administered in and of itself outside of the whole peptide. I mean, I certainly love.
Yeah. I mean, if it's that small, then now it really becomes a great candidate for transdermal delivery also.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Does that step out of the realm of the FDA if it ends up being, 5 or 6 amino acids? They kind of, I know they have, and also delivery systems, right? There's a lot of things that as long as you don't deliver it injected, they don't care because they figure it doesn't work.
Yeah. So right now, the law that governs supplements is the acronym is DSHEA, the Dietary Health and Education, Act. And it defines vitamins or dietary supplements as delivered orally, and they have to be a metabolite. And so what you would have to do is show that, thymosin beta-4 is an endogenous peptide, and that enzymes break it down. And you'd have to show that one section we're discussing is actually present in the body, and you can make the case.
Otherwise it falls under adulterated, right?
Yeah, right. And so, it's possible. Do I know? I don't know off the top of my head if that portion is naturally occurring or naturally found. But
first of all, it is not without risk, thymosin beta-4, because if you already have a cancer and don't know it, it can actually feed it and make it grow faster because of its angiogenesis effects, number one. It also is pretty good whole body anti-inflammatory, and that also can trigger cancers to grow faster. What people don't understand is things like ROS, reactive oxygen species, kills tumors. And like people want to suppress all the, I'm going to take 60,000 milligrams of fish oil every day, and I'm taking a baby aspirin. Like, you could really cause problems by going too far. Inflammation is an important biological effect. Chronic inflammation, not so much. So you got to be careful with things that suppress inflammation too far, and also things that make blood vessels grow faster. But with that being said, assuming you don't have cancer that you know of, you don't have a tumor that you know of, and you train, you eat right, you know, you're not diabetic. Diabetic people, they develop cancer when they fart. Like they're the ones that develop it fast. But with that being said, all that aside, thymosin beta 4 in mouse studies, when taken, so they gave the rodents in several studies. I find there's this protocol, 0.6 milligrams per kilogram in a rodent. If you take 100, I'm a little bit over 100 kilograms in weight, but let's just use 100 for a second. And if you use the conversion factor and times it by 0.081, the sweet spot is right about 5.5 milligrams. About 5, I think it is. I think it was 5, or maybe it's 4. I just did the math for somebody that was 135 pounds, and his was like 3.5 something, somewhere around 5 milligrams. One shot every 7 days for 2 weeks. And the trajectory of changes continue on after the second and virtually last shot. And magic happened in these rodents. Complete reversal of fibrotic liver, complete reversal of fibrotic kidney, complete reversal of fibrous tissue throughout the whole body. It's astonishing to me. Now, look, I want to be careful because I'm saying things about stuff that works. The good stuff, the good thing about things that work is they work. The bad thing about things that work is they work. So you got to be careful. You got to know what you're doing, and you don't want to do it more than that 2-week cycle, because that was where the magic was in the rodents. But if you do that maybe 4 times a year, it could actually have a profound effect. And I believe that when fibrotic tissue breaks down, you become more fluid, your muscles don't ache, you don't have trouble stretching. Like when I stand up, I have to, oh man, my glutes and my legs, and I'm hoping that goes away in the next few weeks. I'm going to say, what do you think about that dosing?
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And that 0.86, is that based on like surface area of rodent to human conversions versus just a direct milligram per kilogram?
0.6 milligrams per kilogram. And then you use that 0.081 to convert from the rodent to the human. Yeah.
No, it sounds really good. I will, and I'm happy to share it with you, you know, offline or after the show. I generally speaking, certainly when I've been at the pharmacies and some of the education seminars, cancer is always mentioned as a counterindication to anything that promotes growth and repair.
Right.
But that's not always the case. And it's a very, you know, I'm not going to make any recommendations. It's always a very tricky topic. But I do have and I can send you over a study showing that thymosin beta 4 actually had some tumor suppression.
I saw those studies. I actually saw them.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's not a sweeping statement, and certainly everyone's different. I do have a lot of doctors that talk to me, especially patients that have had cancer and undergone chemo or surgery and are cancer free. They're still very, indecisive in prescribing any type of, even HRT sometimes. But at that point, I usually ask the medical practitioners, what's the quality of life of that patient? And, are the compounds we're talking about really going to benefit their quality of life? Because there's a lot of patients out there without quality of life.
They don't care about quality of life. If they still are doing androgen deprivation therapy, they don't care about quality.
Right. Yeah. And I'm amazed at how common that is.
Yeah. And so while and you're right, I found studies that said that it suppresses. What people need to understand is around 2008, I did a show about a study that discussed cancer as a highly evolved cell. And while it kills the host, everything that's good for healthy cells, cancer cells leverage twice. They make their own telomerase to keep their telomeres long. They gobble up all the nutrients in their area. We know about Warburg. So you can't kill healthy cells just because you want to starve sick cells. That's why chemotherapy, in my opinion, is akin to burning down the house to get a stain off of the carpet. Like, it is. It's wholesale destruction of healthy cells too. But with that being said, if you are someone who doesn't have cancer in your history and you're eating a ultra low or low carb diet, maybe you're doing keto, maybe you're doing paleo, maybe you're doing carnivore, especially, I don't see a problem unless you've been diagnosed with a cancer. of using thymosin beta-4, not recklessly, just very specific cycles throughout the year, because according to the rodent studies, it reduces fibrotic tissue dramatically. And that really that when we look at youth, we think about moving fast, explosively, jumping, running, being able to, that depends on pliable and supple tissue still being in your body. And as you get older, from that metabolic debris buildup, you start to become, you become like one big scab. Your body becomes a big scab. You know, and really, and I think people should consider looking into it. That's all I'm saying. Look into it. That's all.
No, I definitely think there's a lot to be said about it. It's it was a very popular peptide when it was available through compounding pharmacies. There's still a lot to be learned about it, and I've got nothing but great things to say about it.
All right, we're going to promote this one more time, and then we're going to pull the plug. And also email me at onair@superhumanradio.net if you want Justin to come on and talk specifically about something else that you're interested, whether it's drug related or peptide related. So go to shrnetwork.biz/nutraneeds, NUTRANEEDS, and use the code SHR for 10% off. Get yourself a bottle of BPC. Who knows? You could take that one bottle and all of a sudden things will just disappear, things that have been bothering you. So check it out. Show him love, because he is a sponsor. And remember, the sponsors make this show possible. So if you learn one thing on a show, it's already helped you. And secondly, share this show, because you never know whose life you can change by sharing it. Justin, thanks for being here today, man.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Carl. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun. All right, we'll see everybody tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Take care.